You're listening to How to Drink Less, and I'm your host, Adriana Cloud. Whether your goal is to cut back, take a break, or say goodbye to alcohol for good, this podcast will help you stop drinking on autopilot, learn how to manage cravings, and feel fully in control around alcohol. It's easier than you think. Listen on to find out how. Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I just came back from 2.5 weeks of traveling, and first of all, let me tell you, I am so grateful that I don't have to deal with hangovers on top of jet lag. Jet lag is bad enough, but to add a hangover on top of that would just be so much worse. And of course, over the years, I've had so many trips where I did drink on the plane. And I remember that feeling of landing at my destination, feeling fuzzy and disoriented, to the point where the only solution for that seemed to be to continue drinking. So that's what I would do. And I cannot recommend that as a strategy because you're already exhausted and dehydrated from the travel. And now, by adding alcohol, you're making the dehydration worse and slowing down recovery. I probably should do a whole episode on sober travel at some point. But anyway, the moral of the story is that travel across multiple time zones is hard enough on the body without adding alcohol to the mix. Part of my trip was for fun, and part of it was for work. I attended a hypnosis conference in Las Vegas where I got to learn more about neuroplasticity and new tools and techniques for rewiring the brain, which are super useful for things like habituated behaviors like drinking. And I'm really excited to be bringing these learnings to my clients. But apart from the practical tools and techniques for stopping cravings and teaching the brain new patterns, which I teach to my clients from the very first sessions, one of the topics that came up a lot at the conference was the power of language and hypnotic suggestion. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. In a nutshell, the words you use matter. How you talk to yourself matters. There's actual science behind this and experiments that can measure the impact of language if you use one phrase versus another phrase in how you talk about something. But we don't need to go into the details here. What I want you to take from this is that language is important. Your unconscious mind is listening when you talk to yourself. And this is good news and bad news. It's good news because it means that with a little care and attention, by intentionally choosing the words we speak to ourselves, we can create big transformations. There is great potential to be tapped into by channeling the power of language and using it to create positive changes. But it's bad news because most of us are quite careless with our language. We don't pay attention to the words we use, which is unfortunate because the more we repeat a phrase or the more we're exposed to certain phrases and labels, the more we start to believe them. If a child is told again and again that they're not good at math, they end up believing that, which means they don't try too hard in class to learn the material, which means they don't ask for help and they don't bother doing the homework, which means they don't do great on tests, which just reinforces their belief that they're not good at math. Or if you tell yourself that you're not creative, or you're bad with directions, or you're impulsive, these are all self-fulfilling prophecies. The more you identify with a particular identity label, the more you act like that identity, which means the more evidence you have that that's the kind of person you are. And so the belief gets reinforced until it becomes an indelible part of your self-concept. And there's one phrase in particular that I want to talk about, which many people take on as an identity, and that's the idea that we are powerless over alcohol. I put this in quotation marks if you couldn't hear them. This comes from Alcoholics Anonymous. It's in step 1 of the 12 steps, which reads, "We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable." Now, first of all, it doesn't feel great to tell yourself that you're powerless over alcohol. Our thoughts create our feelings, and when you think something like, "I'm powerless over alcohol," I'm going to guess that it doesn't make you feel confident and motivated to try to change your habits. No, try it for yourself and let me know what you notice. But if I were to venture a guess about how you feel if you think you've got no power over alcohol, I'm going to guess it's something like despair or hopelessness or helplessness. You probably feel defeated before you've even started. At least that's how I feel when I think I'm powerless. And let's play the tape forward. When you feel helpless and defeated, how likely are you to try to change your drinking habits? How likely are you to stay curious and talk back to your cravings? I don't know about you, but when I feel defeated and hopeless, I don't want to do anything. I want to curl up in the fetal position and be left alone and hide from the world. This is how believing that you're powerless becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I think that I'm always going to be dependent on alcohol and I can't really change my addictive nature, no matter how hard I try, then why bother trying to change? If I'm destined to relapse, then I might as well not deprive myself of the reward I want. This sort of thinking opens the door for learned helplessness, which makes habit change harder than it needs to be. And second of all, the claim that we're powerless over alcohol is not actually true. The research does not support it. In chemical terms, alcohol consists of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. The number of carbon atoms varies in different types of alcohol, but that's it. We're talking about carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. To say that you're powerless over a particular type of molecule is a ridiculous claim. And in practical terms, alcohol is just a liquid in a glass. It cannot jump out of the glass and into your mouth. Every time you buy alcohol, every time you pour yourself a drink, every time you drink what's in your glass, every time you refill your glass, you're making a choice. I know it might not always feel like a choice, but every single time there is a decision that gets made by your brain. A part of your brain decides to initiate the process for procuring and consuming the alcohol. You're not powerless over it. You're making a choice every single time. And listen, I get it. There's a certain sense of comfort or even relief that comes from believing we're powerless over something. Because if you're powerless, then it's no good worrying about it, is there? It lifts some of the responsibility off us. If I'm powerless, then there's nothing I can do about it. It takes the pressure off. If I believe that I'm powerless over alcohol and I can't control myself around it, then I can tell myself that it's not my fault if I sometimes drink too much. I just can't help it, right? If that's you, that's okay. I get it. Maybe that story has helped you to get through a tough time and to cut yourself some slack when you needed it the most. But if you're here now, perhaps consider that it might be time for a new story. And I know that sometimes drinking is so automatic that it doesn't really feel like a choice. That perceived powerlessness can feel really true. For example, someone goes out with the best of intentions to order a lemonade, and then next thing you know, they're ordering their usual vodka tonic. Or they find themselves driving by the liquor store after work because that's what they do most evenings. These kinds of behaviors have become automated to the point that we don't consciously think about them. What happens is that the brain starts automatically running that program because that's what we've taught it, and the body performs the motions without us fully realizing what we're doing. And then There's moments when we might drink to the point where we black out or we get physically sick. I'll be the first to admit that I have done both on more than one occasion. And it's difficult to argue that I made a conscious choice to drink myself sick or to drink to the point where I wouldn't remember how I got home or I wouldn't remember stretches of conversations I had while I was out at the bar with my friends. But just because I wasn't consciously aware of the choice I was making and I wasn't fully aware of the consequences of that choice doesn't mean that it wasn't a choice. The alcohol still didn't jump out of the glass and into my mouth. I still had to initiate the action that led to that outcome. When something like that happens, when we do something on autopilot, it's not a sign that we're broken or crazy or powerless. It's actually just an example of the brain working exactly as it's supposed to work. When we repeat a behavior again and again, it gets easier for the brain to execute that behavior without conscious thought. That can feel like powerlessness, but it's really just a deeply ingrained habit, like tying on your shoelaces or like putting water in the kettle when you want to make tea. You do it without really thinking about it because you've done it so many times before. And the good news is that this is all changeable. We're blessed with neuroplasticity, which means that our brains are malleable and we continue to adapt. We can break old patterns and connections and form new patterns and connections. Whatever you've learned can be unlearned, and you can learn new things too. I also want to say a word about the difference between responsibility and blame. Sometimes people cling to the idea of being powerless because the alternative feels too painful. They think that if they're not powerless, then they must take the blame for everything they've done while drinking. But taking responsibility doesn't mean living in shame and punishing yourself for the choices you made when you didn't have the tools you needed or when your habits were running the show. You were doing your best with the tools and the information available to you. That's it. You're human like everyone else, and being human means making mistakes and doing things you're not proud of. Welcome to the club. That's all of us. Taking responsibility simply means recognizing that you have agency. It means acknowledging that you are capable of making choices. And that's actually good news because it means you're capable of making different choices going forward. That's where your power lives. And that's the road to freedom. So if you've been repeating to yourself that you're powerless over alcohol, I want to offer you a different story. You're not powerless. No matter how much you drink right now and how long you've been a drinker, you're not powerless over alcohol. Whatever patterns you've taught your brain to follow can be unlearned. Your brain can change. Your habits can change. And your future can change too. You don't need to wait to hit rock bottom. You don't need to be perfect or to have an overnight transformation. You just need to start practicing your power one small choice at a time. And if you want help learning how to do that, this is exactly what I help my clients with, and I would love to help you too. Book a free consultation. The link is in the show notes. And we can talk about how to interrupt the patterns that aren't serving you and how to build new ones that help you to build the life you want to live. And in the meantime, be careful how you talk to yourself and what beliefs you're reinforcing, because your unconscious mind is always listening. So instead of labeling yourself as powerless, call yourself resourceful. Call yourself strong and resilient. Remind yourself that you're capable of learning and growing, that you're capable of change. I know you are. I know you've already changed so many things in your life. Those are the labels you should hold on to, not the ones that hold you back, but the ones that help you to show up as the person you want to be. That's it from me, my friends. Take care, and I'll talk to you next week. If you're looking for practical advice for how to say no to alcohol and say yes to yourself, you will want to get on my email list. Sign up to receive my free guide with 7 steps to kickstart your sobriety. The link is in the show notes, so go and grab it now, and I'll see you soon in your inbox.